Hello everyone, it's Elizabeth Wilkinson here from the Careers Service. I'm a careers consultant for postgraduates at the University of Manchester. So this session is going to be on interviews and assessment for postgraduates. Just to talk you through some of the logistics before we get started, I'm going to be going through some slides and giving you some examples of types of questions, types of preparation you can do to get yourself through interviews and assessment. I'm going to just have a couple of very short slides right at the end on different types of assessment because it's quite a detailed topic. But what I will do is I'll focus there on how you can get more support and some interactive support that we can offer you online for things like assessment centres and testing and so on. And it's really important that you know about those. So we'll cover those just very briefly at the end. I have my wonderful colleague here, Sarah, who's also going to be assisting. Sarah, do you want to do a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, my name's Sarah Ashworth. I'm a colleague of Elizabeth's, also a careers consultant, usually primarily working with biology, medicine and health, but also have spent a lot of time working with postgraduates and researchers over the years. So do feel free to ask any questions via the questions and chat function, and I shall be typing away and interjecting at various times.
Okay, Sarah omitted to mention that she has got a PhD herself, so any of your difficult PhD life science questions about interviews, Sarah's your woman. Okay, right, so let's get started. Okay, so what I'm going to cover in the session is I'm going to talk a little bit about preparing for interviews and then get on some of the tricky interview questions. I know that that's what often worries people most. So we will talk about some different types of interview questions and how you might approach them and find ways of structuring your answers to be able to deal with those. We'll talk a bit about how you can improve your interview performance, in particular with some of the tricky types of interviews that you're having to do at the moment with everything being online. And then, as I said, just a couple of slides on what else can they put you through and give you some pointers as to how you can help prepare for those as well. Okay, so I think the first thing in terms of preparing is not really to think about yourself. To me, the really important thing that you need to do when you're preparing for interviews is to think about what the employer wants. And so what the employer is looking for is you can get this from the advert if you've got it, or even better, if you've got a person specification or a job description, they can really help you predict the questions that you're going to get. People are always saying, well, what are they going to ask me? And very often, just by having a quick look at the advert, you can pretty well guarantee at least the topics which are going to come up. So the kind of things you can glean from the advert or the person spec, obviously, the obvious things you can get obviously are the knowledge that they need, the experience that they need, and any of the specialist skills, whether there's technical skills or specialist skills, maybe some kind of analysis of linguistics and so on. Whatever it is, those kinds of knowledge, experience and skills will probably be somewhere in either the advert or the person spec. The other things which you do need to look out for, and this is where you often get some of the questions which are quite tricky to answer, are things around your personal skills, those kind of personal skills that you need, that they're going to be selecting on. Things about the strengths, your strengths. Now, I think it's a little bit of a moot point, what is a personal skill and what is a strength, but the strengths are the skills or the attributes or the abilities which come naturally to you, the things you naturally gravitate towards, the things you love doing, the things which are easy for you. So those kinds of strengths, this is a way of recruiting which has come very much to the fore in the last couple of years. So it's very important that you address not just your skills which can be learned, but also the strengths and things which come naturally to you. And then finally, the one on there is values. And from my time working in industry, the way we talked about values is the way we do things around here. This is the way we do stuff. And it was almost like a covenant between the whole company. This is how we act with each other. And those can be very important in trying to find somebody who's got a good fit. This is the fit bit. And it can also be a good way of being able to answer some of the questions like, talk about why do you want to come and work for us? So if you have an advert, and this is one that I literally picked out from online yesterday. This is an advert which was just teased out some of the details, saying, being a smaller consultancy, we pride ourselves on taking a more involved and hands-on approach in our consulting advice to clients. Friendly, collaborative company culture, your voice will always be heard. At this point, I know that a lot of graduates and particularly postgraduates are getting a bit cynical and saying it's a load of HR buzzwords. But it's not. It's telling you the questions that they're going to ask you. So what I did was I picked out what I felt were the words which you need to pay attention to. And I would literally go through this with a highlighter pen. So I think the text which is got a pink background, so pride ourselves, that's a good tell to say that this is something about they think about themselves. This is how we do things around here. And so this is going to tell you some of their values. So being involved and having a hands-on approach is something which is important to the way we do things in our organization. Very friendly, collaborative company culture. Your voice will always be heard. In other words, they're going to be listening to you. But what that tells you is that you need to find ways of demonstrating that you are not only happy working within that, but you can contribute to those values. So you will also show you are friendly, collaborative, and that you do listen to other people. You like getting stuck in and getting hands-on. So those are things which you should be preparing examples for, to show where in your life you've done things which demonstrate those particular values. And then you come down to the personal skills and the strengths. And I really am not going to get too hung up on whether it's a strength or a skill. But things like entrepreneurial flair, that gives you something. So where have you either come up with new ideas, try to find creative ways of solving problems, doing things quickly. If you've done something which is about enterprise or even setting up a company, that's great, but it doesn't have to be about setting up a company. It's about moving fast, understanding commercial realities, being able to come up with creative solutions. Somebody who gets stuck in with all aspects of running a business, that's probably a strength rather than a skill. It's somebody who naturally, as soon as they see something which, an opportunity, they want to get started, they want to get doing. And so you're looking for examples in your life where you've got stuck in doing stuff. Strong interpersonal skills, you'll understand that those are skills which you can learn and you can improve. An avid problem solver. I like this one because it's partly a skill. Problem solving obviously is a skill, but it's the avid bit which takes it into the strengths area. It's somebody who is, give me a problem, I just want to dive in and do it. This is something I love doing, something I get lost in if I'm given a problem to solve. And then somebody who takes the initiative, a skill really. So what you'd be doing is you'd be looking through your life and trying to find examples of where those values, the skills, the strengths, you've got examples to demonstrate those. Now, to give you some clues as to what kind of things you're looking for, because you might think, well, what kind of strengths do I need? There is quite a useful tool which you can access online called jobme.com. I think this is produced by one of the key providers of strengths-based recruitment tools for employers. And it's a free tool that you can use. You can pay to getting a full extended profile, but the basic profile is free for you to use. And so if you're going to be going through any kind of these strengths-based interviews, I would suggest that having a look at this could really help guide you into where to look for the kinds of strengths that you with your self-assessment say that you have. Okay, so once you get onto your interview prep, then you've also got to look for your skills. And it's really hard if somebody throws this at you. So what are your main skills? What are your main strengths? And you're trying to conjure them out of the air, trying to think, well, I think I'm quite good at this. I'm not so sure. We've found it's much easier to go from concrete examples of what you've done and then tease out those abstract concepts of, is this a skill or is this a strength? That's quite hard to do on your own. And so one little exercise that I've done for years, I experienced it myself first and suddenly realized it was revelatory. It worked for me and I realized that actually it could be quite useful for our students, is get a friend to help, okay? And what you want to do is review the strengths or the skills that are needed for the jobs that you want to go into. And that could be using that either the adverts or that things like the strengths profile that I've just referred to. And then try to describe, try to explain examples of what you've done. It might be what you did, could just simply be what did you do last week? or it could be what did you do during a placement or as part of a project. And your friend needs a list of those skills that you're trying to identify. And what they're doing is they're listening to you, listening really carefully and picking out the strengths and the skills you were using. And if you're not clear, and if you're kind of glossing over things, they can prompt you. So they can prompt you and say, no, hang on, so what did you do there? And then teasing out that actually you are maybe negotiating. And that can be a really nice way of doing a number of things. It helps you identify the skills and the strengths that you've got. It also helps you start to articulate your examples. And I think this is, we've got our little kind of model of being curious, being connected and being courageous. This is where being connected can really, really help you. It's about what are the things that you've gone out, you've dared to do, you've been courageous about and had a go at doing. And then describing it to your friends, relaying that, getting them to prompt you and prod you about what you actually did. And you're learning to articulate it as you would then do for an employer. So I think that's a particularly useful way of teasing out your examples. Now, once you've got your examples, you need to be able to describe them. And again, another thing I think which is really important, and this can, your prep can help with this, is to avoid scripts. I know it's so tempting. You kind of want to write, I will write my introduction, or that's my teamwork example. I've got a beautifully written out example, possibly one that you've used on application forms as well. However, in interviews, it really doesn't come across particularly well if you are reading a script. It's very easy to tell from a recruiter's point of view. So if you can, then one way you can get round about this is to review your life, maybe hopefully having got the help of a friend to try to pull out some of these examples, and do something like a mind map or a spider diagram. This is an example of where you might have in the center your achievements and then just keywords. So it might be about your research project and some of the keywords which show the kind of skills that you've been using, data analysis or innovation or communication or negotiation. And from there, you might also have another few keywords on those. So you can use online packages, lots of free online packages you can use to create these mind maps, or just on a piece of paper. And if you keep those keywords in mind rather than long sentences which have been carefully crafted, it's much more naturalistic to be able to describe what you've done. Some recent examples of doing some practice interviews, doing a lot of practice interviews with postgrads, which is very good because that means obviously people are hopefully getting jobs. And I had two outstanding candidates recently, and they were literally doing that script thing. They were good. They were, it wasn't obvious they were doing scripts. Apart from every so often they'd be looking down and then looking back up to see which bits, where had they got to on their script, and then looking back up again. And it took me a little while to be able to throw them a curveball question to cut through the script. And suddenly they were talking with enthusiasm rather than a prepared answer. It was so different. And luckily they were able to take that on board. And at least one of the candidates I know that they're actually going straight into an interview after this practice interview, and they got the job, a marvelous job at that. So have faith in yourself in terms of being able to describe things in ways which are appropriate. Once you've practiced a little bit talking to other people, this will come more naturally to you. Okay, so that's what I was going to tell you about interview preparation. Sarah, are there any questions which you want me to go through at the moment?
No, we don't need any questions at the minute. Thank you very much.
That's fine. Yeah. Sarah, for those who might have joined a little bit late, excuse me a second. Okay, for those who might have joined a little bit late, Sarah Ashworth is in the background. Dr. Sarah Ashworth is in the background, one of my colleagues, and she's answering your questions as we go through. So don't feel that it's just the questions that we're answering face to face. Okay, so let's talk about anything. Let's talk about the questions. Those scary questions. So there are 3 questions which I always ask people to do when I'm doing practice interviews. And 2 of them are entirely predictable. One of them you would hope they don't ask you, but they may do. You need to be prepared for it. The ones that you hope they don't ask you, because it's a horrible question to have, is when you sit down at the start of the interview, or you turn your screen on these days, and somebody says, okay, right, well, just you start out, you tell me a bit about yourself. Where'd you start? And this is where you want to try and pick out some of the key things which, if you only had a minute or two to be able to get yourself that job, what would be the things that you would tell them? Something a little bit about yourself, something about maybe where you are currently at the moment, the kind of postgraduate course you're on, and then prior to that, maybe how you got there. Start out with an undergraduate, going and did some work in a particular industry, came back and did a master's, now doing a PhD, and then maybe something about where you see your future going, or something which might be more about your extracurricular interests, but trying to highlight things which you hope that they're going to pick up on during the rest of the interview. The reason I say it's a tricky question, and one I always try to get people to answer, is if you haven't prepared for it and they throw it at you, it can really harm your chances right at the start of the interview. It really is quite a nasty one to have, even though the interviewers think it's dead easy. So I think it's a really smart thing to do to practice this. Also, if I was doing this live, I'd be I would be timing you to the second to see what you can get into a 1-minute answer to this. So I'm going to suggest that you maybe do this after the webinar. Set yourself a timer for a minute and see how far you get. And what that does is it gives you an indication as to whether you're the kind of person who's rambling because you've only got to your kind of junior school by the end of the minute, or whether you run out of things to say after 20 seconds. And that will then give you some feeling for the kind of preparation that you need to do. Then the other questions. So why are you interested in this role? At some point in the recruitment process, you're going to have to address that. The reason why is that as a recruiter, as I used to be in industry, you want somebody to feel happy coming to work, that they want to be there, that in every job there are things which are either boring or difficult or you don't enjoy particularly well, and there has to be an underlying reason as to why you want to keep going in that role. So why are you interested in that role, down to the personal role. And I think it's really important to think about things that maybe will interest you, which will allow you to demonstrate your strengths and your skills, rather than really interested in this role because it gives me great training and that will give me the opportunity to progress to my management potential. It's not about what they can give you, it's about what you can give them in that role, what you can offer them in the role. Then why are you interested in working for us? A tricky one again. I know that a lot of people will learn a lot of facts about the employer, maybe from their website or from their accounts or whatever, but it's not so much about you quoting back to them about what they say about themselves. It's, I think, a better way is trying to find those values. How do they think about themselves? How do they think about the people around here? This is what we do. This is who we are. And find ways of showing how that resonates with you from things that you've done and things which are important to you. So that can be a way of showing you that you fit in because you're actually already attuned into their values and you're living those values. That's also interesting if you've maybe spoken to somebody from the organization. They like that because it demonstrates that you've done your research about them. Okay, so those are the 3 difficult starting point questions. Let's go on to a couple of different types of interview questions. Now, for the last 20 or 30 years, the competency-based questions have been the standard way that people have been doing interviews. Competencies, these are the skills-based questions and based on examples. And the principle on this is that if you, well, first of all, to recognize, interviews are a really lousy way of predicting who's going to be good in the job. That's why they're doing all these other types of assessment. However, we're human beings and it's very unlikely you're going to go into a job without having an interview of some sort. So they can improve their kind of hit rate of getting the right person by figuring out what kind of skills do you need within a job. Well, where have you demonstrated those skills? Maybe in a different context, and particularly that's relevant for students and graduates where maybe you haven't had much, if any, work experience. So where have you demonstrated those skills? because having demonstrated the skills, maybe in a different context, is the best predictor that you could use the same skills in a work context in the future. So that's the principle behind it. So what they're looking for are very specific examples, not generic what I would do, it's what I have done. And this is where all that preparation is important, so that you have already thought about examples of what you've done in your life and where you've been demonstrating those skills in the past. So tell me about a time when you faced a difficult challenge. Okay, what postgraduate hasn't dealt with that, in particular our PhDs? Describe a time when you persuaded others to your way of thinking. Again, that kind of persuading and influencing is a really important skill. Influencing is one of those kind of differentiating skills between those who are okay at work and those who are the ones who will rise up through leadership roles. So influencing is very important. Give an example of when you've dealt with conflict in a team. Okay, so you need to have trawled your life to be able to deal with those. What I will do is I'll talk you through some structures to be able to help you put a structure around those answers, but what you're looking for are some specific examples. Now on the strength side, these are a little bit different. I'm a little bit skeptical about some of these because I was brought up in the whole competency-based interviewing regime. However, it's what you need to be aware of, and obviously I can see the value in a lot of this. This is trying to ask you short questions which will try to get to the authentic you, the authentic strengths that you have, the things that you love doing, the ways that you operate naturally. So when are you at your best? What do you enjoy doing outside your study or work? What are you good at? What do you need to be better at? Sometimes these are almost kind of designed to trip you up into telling them the truth, which is obviously what they want, but you just want to be a little bit careful about not telling them how, I'm really hopeless at finishing things in a job which is all about finishing projects and so on. So you will get lots and lots of these questions, and very short questions, and they won't necessarily prompt you for any further answers. So you can answer these with a one-word answer. However, if you do, then you're missing out on being able to score quite highly in their assessments. So you kind of want to give them a one-word answer, but with a short example to back it up. And again, let's go through a couple of ways of structuring both the competency question answers and the strengths answers. So, classic way, you've probably come across this before if you've dealt with interviews in a recent history, the STAR methodology. So it's about the situation. So this is a way to structure it. You tell them a little bit about the situation you were in, one of these give me example questions. You tell them about the task, the specific task that you worked on. You need to talk about the actions that you personally took. Even if it's a team example, it's what you personally did. You then look at what was the end result. And then if you want to elevate it to the next level, and I think you should be doing this as postgrads, is think about your reflection on it. What did you gain from this? What did you learn from it? What insights did you gain? Now, in terms of structuring this between those different sections, the biggest mistake people make is they spend a lot of time talking about the situation and the task, giving that context. And actually, that needs to be the short part. You want that to be in a sentence. And again, your preparation can really help there. So what you can do is, by practicing describing an example to somebody else, you can get to the core of what they need to know and cut out all the extra stuff. So this is where I would definitely say put your emphasis, a very short one-sentence description of the situation and the task. Then what you want to do is spend most of your answer on those actions. And the reason these are difficult is because very often it's things you're good at. And frankly, most of us don't go through life doing things that we're good at and breaking it down into very small micro actions, thinking about what I'm doing next. You just do it because it comes naturally to you. And that's hard when you've actually got to break it down and describe to somebody else. So again, this is a good reason for maybe enlisting the help of a friend to try to unpick some of the reasons why did that go well. So I just asked them to do it and they did it. Why did they do it? How did you present your case? Why did why did they respond in that way? So tease those apart, and that's where your answer should really focus. Short end result, and then reflection. So quick example of, just to give you an idea of the structure there. So as a volunteer at the local food bank, one evening a week, that's the situation. So you see how quick it can be? I needed to ensure the food donations were processed and available for customers as soon as possible. That was my task. Then if you can put in some quantified detail, so working in a team of 3, so you're getting teamwork in there, you're getting a team of 3 people. I identified shortages, prioritized unloading to meet the client's immediate needs, some more details of the actions that you took. But you can see this kind of using good, strong verbs to cut down the number of words you have to use. Then, as a result, our team met the target of processing 4 donations per shift. And then I think the bit which takes it on to the next level is, I can't read that from the, it's covered over. So I realized that you can achieve a lot in tight time scales if you organize yourselves effectively. Just have a quick look. If you organize effectively, the team understands their role, and you communicate with your team when things change. So that gives you an idea of how to structure a STAR answer. Now, if you've got one of these little, backup examples to go with a strength, I tried this for myself, and I thought a different structure worked for me. So I'll give you this as an alternative. Oops. So what are your key skills and strengths? I would always say have 3 strengths that you can think of in your back pocket. Thinking in 3s, thinking in bullet points is a way to help you structure your answers. So I would say RSTAR is actually the way I did it. Okay, real example, when I was preparing an interviews course. So my example was, I like pushing boundaries. That's the strength or the skill. So it's something I enjoy doing. I like, trying to do new stuff. For example, I recently opted, remember, if anybody was in the CV session, it's not that you had to, you opted, chose, decided to. So it doesn't feel like you were under stress to have to do it. I opted to create completely new materials for an interview skills course. That's actually the result. That was the end result. So that's why this structure STAR doesn't always work in the same way you might expect. And then I got into the situation. So I already had tried and tested but old materials. And then what you would do is you go in and describe the actions and expand on how I did it. And then the reflection at the end. I think this new approach better reflects current and emerging recruitment practice. So in a very short answer, you've managed to get all these different aspects in. And I think, personally, I think if you've got these strengths type of questions where they're asking for one particular strength, having these kind of little micro examples to back it up in that format can be a really smart way of being able to present yourself effectively. The other thing you need to know about strengths is that they're measuring your level of enthusiasm. Again, so it's not just about the words that you're using. It's about, are you smiling? Are you using your hands? Are you demonstrating enthusiasm? Now, as an introvert myself, I know that enthusiasm can be demonstrated in many different ways. And they will normally be asking a few questions at the start to kind of calibrate what does enthusiastic look like in your case. So don't feel you have to be too different to your natural self. But if you are naturally quite constrained, then force yourself to smile more, force yourself to use your hands more, to have variation in your voice. So this kind of performance can be very important. I think it's particularly important if you might be going through a recorded interview, because that's when you may get AI systems who are actually going to use different cues in terms of the language you use, your facial expression, to try to assess your strengths and how enthusiastic you are. Okay, so that's a little tip there. Right, let's go on to some of the other types of questions that you might have. Now, The other difficult question, and it's not a good question, but it's still used, so it's probably a good idea, again, to have an answer for ready so that you don't get blindsided when it does come up is, so what's your main weakness? I'll be honest, I have asked this question as a graduate recruiter, and one of the reasons you ask the question is because sometimes people tell you the truth, the whole truth, and the truth that they probably shouldn't be admitting to. So, you know, it's not unusual for people to tell you, oh my goodness, I'm really useless at this. And you're sitting there thinking, don't tell me this. That's important to the job. You know, you're not going to get the job now. So a smart thing to do, I think, is you've got to be honest. I think the idea about saying, oh, I'm a bit too much of a perfectionist, I'm a bit too conscientious. No. Any recruiter worth their salt says, nah, give me a real one. So I think a better way of approaching it is to think about something that maybe used to be a weakness, but you've worked on. And now you can kind of selling it as an underlying weakness, but you know how to cope with it. So, you know, the classic ones I think for doing that is if you've learned to manage your time better, so a skill that you can learn to improve on. So you can, you know, I've heard some good examples where people can tell slightly horror stories about having poor results maybe in the first year of university, realizing they needed to learn how to manage their time and then go through the process of showing how they've done that. Another one, classic one there, is presentation skills, because they scare a lot of people. Most people at the start struggle with that, but it's something you can learn to get better at. So definitely have an answer in the bag ready for that one. Other kinds of questions. This is about, will you be a good investment for an employer? And the classic one, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Have you any idea where you're going to be in 5 years' time? Personally, you know, it's very difficult to predict 5 minutes' time at the moment. And to be able to pick on a job that you're expecting to be able to do, I think is probably just a bit of a fantasy, frankly. So I think one way I like to address this is to think about, what would you like to have delivered in the next 5 years? What would you like to have done within the next 5 years? So you're not having to pitch for a particular job, but you're saying, well, within 5 years, I would hope to have had the opportunity to manage a team. I think that I would like to have had significant budgetary responsibility for a major project, and maybe I would like to have had the opportunity to do a project with your sister plant out in Switzerland. That would help me make good use of my German language skills. So what you're kind of seeding there is, you're the kind of person who's going to come in and get things done. What you haven't told them is, well, frankly, I'm going to get 2 or 3 years experience with you, and then I'm going to go work for the employer I really want to work for somewhere else. That's the bit you don't tell them. But you're delivering all these things, which you can see yourself delivering over the next few years. Obviously, if you're going for academic roles, what ideas do you have for further research? And what are potential sources for funding? So this is, are you thinking strategically about your academic potential? Where might the funding come for the kind of research that you want to do? Are you starting to think about fellowships? Not immediately, maybe, if you're going to go for a postdoc job initially. But if you're going to be looking for academic careers, then you are going to be looking at, where's the funding going to come potentially for an individual fellowship and beyond. So are you thinking strategically? And then one which a lot of people are scared about, but I don't see the problem with, is, which other jobs have you applied for? Now, I used to recruit in the telecommunications industry, and this was a question that we used to ask regularly. And the reason we would ask that was simply to see if you had a consistency of the types of jobs that you were applying for. So are you applying for our competitors? If you were, that was actually a good thing, because it meant that you were looking at similar jobs. You'd already actually alighted on a particular industry or a particular type of role which interested you. The really smart ones would say, well, actually, yes, I've been applying for Siemens in this area. I've got to the second interview with that, which is next week. And there's a recruiter, I'm thinking, they already think they're good. Siemens is one of our competitors. And if they're already going for a second interview, if this one's any good, I need to get in quickly and offer them a second interview too. So I don't think it's one to be scared of. You don't have to tell them every job you've applied for, though. So if you're being a bit more scattergun, then just limit it to things which are broadly in the same field. That'll be more useful. Also, then you get on to the questions that you might want to ask. So I would say, yes, it's a really good idea to ask about future prospects in the organization. Again, you know, if you can bring in some idea about some of the skills that you've got, which you might be able to apply, that can be a way of making you thinking, right, okay, so what would be the opportunity to apply my skills in data science or data visualization within this role? And the recruiter is probably then thinking, you can maybe put them in that group or in that group. So you're seeding the idea that you could come in and apply skills which would be valuable in a range of different places in their organization. For academics, asking about their research, that could be useful, but particularly trying to make links with what you've done and how that might apply to the research that they've been doing. You might want to talk about the training or learning opportunities there are in an organization. I don't think it's a very good selling point for why do I want to come and work here is because you're going to give me great training. But I think it's perfectly good to ask about training maybe in some specific areas that you think you'd really like to learn. And then you could even ask the interviewer, what do they enjoy about the organization? Okay. The areas to steer clear of, I think, are anything which is already on their website or in their literature, particularly with HR, because HR probably had to write all that stuff. And if all you're demonstrating is that you haven't read what they've spent half the summer writing, then it doesn't get you off to a good start. You can go to the other end of the extreme where you're asking very detailed questions because you've done your research and you're going to a lot of detail. But if you're asking very, very specific detailed questions about things which they don't know the answer to, again, embarrassing your interviewer because they don't know the answer to the questions probably isn't a good start to your interview. And then the one which I know people want to ask, but there's a couple of good reasons why asking about salary at the end of an interview is not your ideal time. The reason mainly being is that if you ask about salary, they can give you an answer and that's it. That's what you got. That's the salary you're going to be offered. If you leave it and don't try to avoid any mention of salary if you can until they want to offer you the job, that's when you've got negotiating power. So once you know that they want you, they've offered you the job, with a bit of luck, they've actually turned down the other applicants, then you can start to negotiate on salary. So I would say don't ask about salary at that point. The other reason not to ask about salary is you can go through, as an interviewer, you can go through a great interview, you think, oh, this guy's really good, or this woman's really good. And then, got any questions? What's the salary? And if that's the only thing you ask or the first thing you ask, your heart sinks a bit because you're thinking, oh, I thought they were really interested in the job and they're only interested in what we're going to pay them. So it's quite hard to ask those questions without sounding mercenary. Similarly, things like details about working hours, holiday or benefits. Obviously, they're things you're going to want to know, but they're things you're going to probably want to know at the point that they offer you the job. And again, there may be some opportunity to negotiate on those. Okay, so that's a lot of questions to raise with you. Sarah, are there any questions which you want me to address at the moment, or are you busy speedily typing in the background? I know you've got very fast fingers.
I've been typing away, so and what I've been trying to do is send the questions to everybody so everybody could see the questions and my answers. One theme which came across in a couple of questions, Elizabeth, so I don't know if you wanted to say any more about this, is how you go about exactly bringing in examples and skills at the same time. Bearing in mind these questions did come in before you'd gone through the STAR and the RSTAR approach, but
yeah, I think it's the way that you describe your examples. This thing about trying to figure out how can you use the skills words within your examples, and words which are akin to those skills. So instead of just communication, it could be about persuading, it could be about influencing, it could be about presenting, all aspects of communication. And I think being able to have that kind of rich vocabulary of verbs which you weave into your answers rather than saying, I use this skill in communication, is actually a better way of doing it. You got any particular additions to that, Sarah?
Just another question, which was, what would you say if the main reason you want to work for an employer is because you want to build your experience? Perhaps it's going to be the first real substantive role that you've held. Is it okay to say that you want to work for this employer because you want to build your experience?
Well, I think the problem you've got is the employer doesn't need somebody to build experience. You know, obviously you will be building experience with them, but they actually want you to deliver things. And so I think it's probably more effective to say, I'm really interested in learning about X, Y, and Z and applying that within this type of role. So it's about not about learning, it's about the applying the learning that you've already bringing with you. And obviously as postgrads, you've got the opportunity to convince them that the point about taking a postgrad is to have somebody who's already got experience, who's already got skills at a higher level, which you can apply straight away. So I think that's something I would focus more on what you're bringing with you as postgraduates.
Cool. And just one final one, which was around the weaknesses question. What suggestions do you have as to how to address lack of confidence, if that's one of your weaknesses?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
It's a tricky one.
It depends on the job you're going to go for. So if the job is about having to go and do a lot of networking and sales and so on, then I wouldn't use lack of confidence as your answer. I would steer clear of things which are going to be critical to the job. But if you something which you can say, I really need to build my confidence, which is different to saying I've got no confidence. Maybe you think about times when you've used your courage. See, I like courage rather than confidence. I mean, you've been through experiences where it scared you, but you've still done it. You've had the nerve to try things, and then you reflect back on how that's helped to build your confidence. And so the idea about somebody who dares to do things even though they're scary, I think is something that anybody can appreciate, because it shows somebody is on the way to building further confidence. It's a different way of doing it.
We've had another weakness question come in whilst you've been talking. Could you describe not asking for help as a weakness?
I think my view would be you can do, as long as you've got an answer which shows where you learn to overcome that. So if your natural instinct, as many of us, is to beaver away in the background and try and do everything independently, it's particularly a researcher instinct, is that, I think. But I think to use that as an example, I think you want to have something where you were put in a situation where you did or you had to ask for help, and how that worked better, and how you've learned from that experience. And so in future you'll go forward and do some more asking for help. Yeah.
Okay. We've got time for one more.
Can do very quickly. I've got a few slides to do. Got the whole of assessments and video interviews to do. Okay.
Oh, that's fine. There's more popping in, so I'll get back to typing responses.
Get the fingers going again. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the kinds of interviews that you're going to be having at the moment. Now, obviously, everything's been done online at the moment, but this was something which was happening anyway in terms of recruitment, so it's not that big a difference. Obviously, there are the kind of online live interviews, and I've done interviews by web conferencing or by Skype for real jobs. Been doing these for years, where people are maybe on different continents. And I know that some of you who've maybe come for postgraduate degrees from elsewhere in the world might have been interviewed by video link anyway. So it's not that different. Ways to set yourself up for success, though. I think one of the key things to do, you remember this guy who was on the BBC News last year and his little daughters came running in? It's one of the most shared videos of last year. Lovely idea, but it's a really good example of, you want that door closed. You want remove the potential for noise. And I've got a notice on the door behind there which tells my other half that I'm busy broadcasting at the moment, but I can hear he's got the kettle on. I'm hoping he's not going to make much noise. So you remove the kind of pets or kids or phones and things like that, everything on silent. You want to dress for the interview, and yes, all the way down, just in case that person does come in and you have to get up and walk to the door. You don't want to be showing your kind of tatty jeans on underneath your business suit. Think about what's behind you, and I have to really carefully move my camera so that the lamp doesn't come out of the middle of my head, depending on where I'm normally sitting. So it's a little bit different, and these things you can do in advance, so it's not going to be something which hopefully trips you up during a practice, during a real interview. Obviously, make sure that if you're on a laptop, everything's plugged in or charged. Close all your applications if you can, and turn off those notifications. You can never be too sure what's going to suddenly ping up with notifications. That's one of the reasons why I try to turn off as many applications as possible. Put everything on silent. If you're on Windows 10, then you've got Focus Assist, which will stop little notifications popping up. So explore all the ways of making all those sounds turn off. And then try to light your face. Now at the moment, I'm in a nice little room, but it's fairly subdued lighting, so I've got various lamps which are trying to light my face. Otherwise, it doesn't necessarily look dark, but it tends to look kind of grainy. So, and then finally, smile. Really hard to do if you're in an interview, but it does make a massive difference. Okay. But what about these awful recorded video interviews? Now, these have been around for a little while now, so they were becoming the norm. They quickly took over from telephone interviews because they're asynchronous. What it means is that you are sent an invitation to do a recorded interview by an employer, and you've been given a certain time limit in which to do it, and you have to, hopefully, might get 3 or 4 days notice. Gives you the opportunity to practice, and if possible, to try and get a practice interview with us. You're allowed, I think, 1 interview simulation in a certain period, maybe about 90 days, with the career service, and we will try to make ourselves available for you. We can't guarantee it various times a year, but we always do try to have some last-minute availability of interview simulations. And it's really good for getting you warmed up. The idea is not to make you feel bad about yourself. The idea is to boost your confidence, fix the things we can do at short notice, and make you feel comfortable with articulating yourself. One really important point, in these times when you might be isolating, you may be not having much conversation with other people some days, just having something which gets you talking. I've done a couple of practice interviews with people who are going on to do the full interviews that morning, and it was a good idea for them to just learn to articulate themselves, be open, and talk to another person. So usual things apply about checking your camera, your mic, and the lighting. One thing I've been told is you talk to the person behind the camera. Okay. Now with these kinds of video interviews, there won't actually be a person there. It'll all be recorded. The picture you're seeing there, the image you're seeing on the screen, is what the employer will see. So what they will see is the question you've been asked to deal with, and then your video answer. And they could be making their notes. They'll have all the candidates there, so they can rate you according to how well they think you've answered the questions. So all they're going to see is that short video answer. So you'll have a bit of reading time, a bit of prep time, and it may be as little as 30 seconds, maybe a little bit more, but it's not unusual just to have 30 seconds, which obviously is more than you would get in a real live interview, so it's not that bad. And then it might be 2 minutes, or maybe up to even 5 minutes to answer the question. But it is very strictly timed. And the issue you'll have is that if you keep going and you run out of that 2 minutes, it will just cut off. You will not actually get to your conclusion. So it's very important that you're within the time limit. On the other hand, if you run out of things to say after 1 minute and 40 seconds, it will still be filming you for those last 20 seconds. So if you're thinking, oh, that's my answer. Right, next question. All that's on video. So you have to remember that you're on camera for the whole of the time that they're giving you. Good idea to make notes during your prep time. So if you've got about 30 seconds, and you can keep your notes beside your screen. What I would also suggest is, if you're going for a screen, either have, if you've got your laptop or your screen, against a wall, you could have post-it notes all over the wall to remind you of what you want to say, or even round about your monitor or your laptop. So try and find some way to be able to get those notes. This is where those individual key bullet points rather than scripts can really come in. And then I took some of these notes from this slide from a colleague, and they had relax, smile. I was thinking, do you really think you're going to be relaxed in this case? I think that's a bit of a tough one to ask you to do too. If you can simulate looking relaxed, that's fine. One of the best ways to do it though is to smile. You really won't feel like it. But this is where these AI machines are starting to come in. A lot of the video interviews are going to be looked at by real human beings. But there are some larger employers and some of the providers, I think HireVue is one, where there's a lot of looking for facial cues, the types of language you use, and a computer is making an assessment of you. And if you don't smile and look animated, then it will interpret that, possibly very wrongly, but it will interpret that as lack of enthusiasm. So another good reason to smile and try and keep your energy levels up so you're not hyper enthusiastic, but quite enthusiastic. Obviously, at some point we're going to be going back to face-to-face interviews, and we can talk about, how you sit in a chair and all the rest. But I think at the moment it's really important to focus on the video side of things. Certainly, all the interviewers that we know of are doing things online. Right, what else can they put you through? So this is a real quick scamper through. They can put you through tests. Tests haven't gone away. They're no longer being done by pencil and a piece of paper. Virtually all online, obviously. So verbal, numeric, logical thinking, it's about testing your thinking ability. There are also tests which are situational judgment tests, and these are tricky ones because they're about what would you do in a situation which is normally bespoke to that organization. And so this is where you need to understand how do they operate, what's the way that they would be expected to operate within a business context very often. That can be really hard if you haven't worked in an organization and don't understand the etiquette, particularly if you come from another country. And that's why I would strongly recommend for any of our international students who want to have a go at getting a job within the UK. It's not just about visas. It's also about, do you understand the way that UK businesses operate in the workplace? If you haven't had the chance to do that, even doing something volunteering will give you an insight into, the usual British thing about we don't actually say what we mean. We might say, I'm not so sure about that, when actually we mean, I hate it, okay? And you need to learn about those kind of nuances. Those will come out in these situational judgment tests, and I know it's something which our international students find very tricky. Personality tests, not so commonly used within assessment these days, more often maybe for development centres, but there may be some aspects of people with particular types of personality which an employer feels are going to be successful in a particular type of job. And one which has really come in recently is the game-based assessments, where they're trying to get to your instincts. They can be fun to do. People enjoy doing these, but they're trying to measure reaction times. They're measuring the choices that you're making under pressure and without you having to think about it too much. Now, the way we can give you support on most of these is we've got a product, or in fact, two products we've got, and we paid for licenses for you. One of them is Graduates First, and that's a really smart suite of resources which will allow you to do practice tests and get some automated feedback. Do a personality profile, the potential interview questions. They've got loads more types of new tests will come in all the time, game-based assessments. They've also got some information about particular key big employers and what the recruitment process is, so you can see where these different types of assessments might come in throughout the process. The other one we've got is Profiling for Success, which we've used for a long time, and that's very good on the personality profile, learning styles, your career interests. That's good for helping you understand about yourself and try to do that kind of preparation research for what you've got to offer an employer. In terms of other things you can put you through, if you're going to go for consultancy type roles, then doing case study interviews, that's a very specialist area. I think that's something which you wouldn't get that in every interview or assessment process, but particularly for consultancy, it's important to learn how to do those. You might have assessment centres, and those are going online. And we've had employers come along and do webinars on how do you get through their online assessment centres. Got group exercises and discussions, which you're doing presumably now by Zoom. Presentations, still having to present stuff, and things like in-tray or other inbox exercises where they're throwing stuff at like a pretend email inbox, and you have to prioritize and decide what actions you would take, which ones you prioritize, what you would do with each of these things which get thrown at you. And again, Graduates First will give you some good support in most of those areas, give you the opportunity to practice these things. We always say it's really important to have a go at practice test before having to do it for real. It can really improve your performance, particularly in those ability tests, the logical and verbal and numerical reasoning tests. Doing them as a practice first helps you just understand the format, get a feel for whether you need to speed up or whether you need to improve your accuracy. And that can then help you improve your performance when you have to do it for real. Okay, so that's a lot to get through. We've got lots of further help. We're really here for you. And one thing I think a lot of us enjoy doing, we love doing that kind of interview coaching or support and making sure that you really make the best of yourself. We want you to be able to present yourself in the best way possible at interviews. We've got lots of support on the Careers Service website at manchester.ac.uk/careers. You can navigate to where we've got applications and interviews information. We've got those practice video interview software access. So we've now got access to something called Sonru, which if you've got an interview coming up, or even if you just want to practice, then we've got some licenses to allow you to do one of those recorded online videos. We can do interview simulations with careers advisors, and so I'm doing lots of those and thoroughly enjoy doing them. It's really useful to be able to help people suddenly realise where they've been going wrong and fix their interviews. And we've got online live workshops, Q&As like this, and recorded workshops. One of the reasons I wanted to show you the Careers Service YouTube channel, and that kind of QR code will take you directly there, is we're now building up a nice suite of resources, some of them which are specific for postgraduates, but a lot of them are generic, and some of them being delivered by employers. So I think it gives you a nice insight into whatever it is aspect of assessment you're trying to get through. And as I mentioned, Graduates First have got these test and assessment centre exercises and information and practice. So Sarah, I know that you've been typing very fast. Are there any final questions that you want me to cover?
I think a lot of questions that are coming in the second half of the talk have been about those elements of actually presenting yourself in interviews. So any advice that you might have for people for whom English isn't their first language and they're concerned about perhaps the breadth of language, the actual words they're using, as well as how well understood they are.
Okay, that's a really good point. And I think obviously we see many of our postgrads are international. That's one of the joys of having this type of role. It's getting to meet people from all over the world. And the one consistent thing I end up telling international students or asking international students to do is to slow down and articulate. So I think there's a tendency to want to rush into speaking English if you're doing an interview in something which isn't your first language, and that can mean that you're rushing out answers. They get slurred or the consonants aren't coming out very clearly, and very often just simply slowing down is a much better strategy. It's very rare that you'll lose the words that you're looking for. And actually, if you slow down, maybe it gives you a little bit more time to think of the right words or to think of ways of describing things if you can't quite access the exact right word you were hoping for. So that would be my thing. Same with presentations. It's slow down, don't panic. It's actually easier for everybody to understand if you speak more slowly. Okay.
So what would you say for slowing down, because that was another follow-up question I had. Do you think the breathing is the most helpful thing with slowing down?
It's always a good idea to breathe, I think, optional, but yeah. I think taking the odd space in what you're saying. I know that I, like many other people, speak very fast, and sometimes I have to remind myself, stop, give some gaps. Hopefully if you're finding this quite fast in terms of presentation, once I get the video online on YouTube, it will have all the subtitles, so you actually have the transcript there as well. So yeah, so give yourself some space. If you're starting to panic a little bit, then just some gentle breathing, exhaling rather than inhaling, which could lead to hyperventilating. This kind of slow exhalation is the way to calm yourself down rather than fast inhalation. Okay. Anything else you would say about that, Sarah?
No, I mean, I was responding to somebody who was asking about that on the question, saying I quite like this sort of psychological internal dialogue that you can use, which says rather than feeling scared, you tell yourself you're feeling excited, because the physiological response to fear and excitement is the same. So if instead of thinking, oh my goodness, I'm so nervous, if you think I'm really excited about this, you just need to tell yourself it for, you know, a few 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 times over. And actually I've found it helps me feel a lot more excited rather than scared. And that's a better mind frame to be in.
See, this is why I like working with Sarah. I learn so much, whether it's about your microbiology research projects or whether it's about using these kind of techniques. Okay, so some really good advice there from Sarah.
And then I've had one final question come in, which is obviously this is from a master's student. They've got a master's program is obviously quite intense, and then they might also be preparing applications to graduate schemes and PhDs. Any tips on time management and effectively preparing for interviews?
Oh gosh, I would say start before you need it. It's the last minute problem, you know, things which make it difficult. And I think, personally, I think this idea about trying to enlist a group of friends, colleagues, other people going through interviews or going through recruitment processes to talk about your experiences, I think that just, I wouldn't underestimate how important that is. One thing that we found when we were doing some research on what helps our successful graduates achieve that early career success was a common theme was they talked to their friends about careers. And we thought, well, of course, everybody does, because obviously we're unnaturally interested in careers. And then we discovered that for a lot of people, it's a real taboo. And, you know, we had an intern working with us, and she said, "Ooh, that's the second bottle of wine conversation." You know, it took that much sort of lubrication for them to learn to open up about their career. But if you're able to talk to other people and try to explain to them what you were doing, you're practicing your interview technique, and it's going to sound much more natural. And you may get feedback from them, so, you know, telling you, actually, do you realize how, you know, how good you are at doing a particular type of skill? And then suddenly that will give you some confidence that you can be able to articulate that to employers. So there's a lot to do, but simply talking to other people on your program or on different programs, or if you're in halls of residence, talking to other people who are completely different to you, I think that will help you not just with your interviews, but it will also just give you a support network. You know, we're here for when you can get to us, but you know, we're here kind of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and you need sometimes support at different times of your life. And I think it's very important that you try and get that from the people around about you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Last final question was, where can our attendees today find the slides?
Okay, the slides along with the videos, once that's processed, will be on the Career Service website under the talk section for postgraduates. So if you look under careers homepage, you'll see a section for postgraduates, and then under there's postgraduate talks. So all the slides for the previous talks are on there already. There's one video still waiting to be processed from last week, but hopefully by the early next week, then we'll have this video and the other videos up there ready for you, and they'll be available for the rest of the year. Okay.
I'm just posting the link in there to that the exact link to that area of our careers website. So
it's quite a long link, so I don't normally write it on the slide.
No. So I've just put that in the question. So if anybody wants to click through on that, then
thank you very much. Okay. Right, okay, so thank you all for attending. Very best of luck with your interviews. I'm sure you're going to do really well, and we will look forward to you hearing about you, hopefully getting through. One really important thing, if you go for an interview, particularly if you had a practice with us, let us know. Let us know how you get on, and particularly let us know if you get the job, because that always makes our job worthwhile as well. Okay, so okay, so we're going to stop the webinar now, and very best of luck.